The 1970s, a time when fashion was loud, hairstyles were high, and guilty pleasures were plenty. Whether it was roller skating down the street in bell-bottoms or trying to master disco moves, you were definitely guilty of something. Let's dive into those funny little secrets we all shared. Putting aluminum foil on TV antennas. Remember the days of rabbit ears? TV reception was spotty at best, and the only solution we could think of was to wrap aluminum foil around the antennas. Did it work? Sometimes. But we didn't care. It felt like we were TV engineers on a mission to catch that one good channel. You probably even had a foil artist in the family who insisted they could get the perfect signal. Wearing bell-bottoms, even if you couldn't pull them off. Whether you looked great in them or not, you wore bell-bottoms because everyone was wearing bell-bottoms. There was something about those wide-legged pants that made us feel instantly cool. Until you tripped on the fabric, or worse, it got caught in your bike chain. Still, we wore them with pride, didn't we? Talking into a fan to make your robot voice. Admit it, at some point, you found a fan, and before you knew it, you were talking into it like some kind of futuristic robot. The distorted voice was endlessly amusing, and you probably spent a good 10 minutes pretending you were broadcasting from outer space. Don't worry, you weren't the only one. It was a universal 70s experience. Hanging beaded curtains. Nothing said "I'm cool" like a beaded curtain. It was like walking through a magical portal every time you entered a room. But let's be honest, those beads tangled up constantly and made a racket every time you went through them. You probably spent more time untangling them than anything else, but we wouldn't have had it any other way. Using the phone book for everything. In the 70s, the phone book was your best friend. It was your map, your business directory, and your connection to the world. Looking up a number wasn't just practical, it felt like a ritual. You'd grab that massive yellow tome and feel like you had the whole world at your fingertips. And don't forget the joy of flipping through the white pages to find your crush's phone number. If you're enjoying this trip back in time, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me bring you more content like this. Rocking out to 8 tracks in your car. There was nothing quite like the sound of an 8-track tape playing your favorite tunes. Sure, they were clunky, and halfway through your favorite song, the track would switch abruptly. But we didn't care. We loved those clunky tapes. You probably had a huge collection, proudly stacked in your car's glove compartment, ready for the next road trip. Putting baby oil on for a tan. Ah, the days before we knew about sunscreen. We all thought the best way to get that summer glow was to slather on baby oil and lie out in the sun for hours. Of course, this often led to sunburns instead of tans, but hey, it was all part of the 70s experience. Looking back, it's a wonder we weren't all walking around like crispy bacon, taking Polaroids of everything. In an era before selfies and smartphones, Polaroids were the ultimate way to capture a moment. The instant gratification of watching that little photo develop in front of your eyes was magical. Of course, we were all guilty of shaking the photo like a madman, even though it didn't make it develop any faster. But hey, it was all part of the fun. Spending hours. Untangling cassette tapes. If you ever owned a cassette player, you know the frustration of having your favorite tape get caught in the player and unravel like a spaghetti disaster. And instead of giving up, what did we do? We carefully rewound the tape using a pencil, hoping that we could save it. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes we had to say goodbye to our favorite mixtape forever. Learning disco moves and never quite getting them right. Let's face it, disco fever hit hard, and we all tried to get in on the action. Whether you were at a party or just practicing in your room, you probably tried, and failed, to master some of those iconic moves like the hustle or the infamous finger-pointing, stayin' alive move. It didn't matter how awkward it looked. Disco was a vibe, and we were all writing it. Doodling flowers and peace signs everywhere. The 70s were all about peace, love and flower power, and you made sure everyone knew it. Your notebooks, school folders, and even your sneakers were probably covered with doodles of peace signs, smiley faces, and flowers. Every inch of space was a canvas for your inner artist, and you couldn't resist marking it with a little groovy flair. Watching cartoons on Saturday mornings in pajamas. There was no greater joy than waking up on a Saturday morning, still in your pajamas, grabbing a bowl of sugary cereal, and plopping yourself in front of the TV. You were glued to classic cartoons like Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones for hours. Let's be honest, it was the one time during the week when you didn't have a care in the world. Just you, your jammies, and endless animated adventures. Listening to music on a portable transistor radio. Before Walkmans came along, you carried your trusty little transistor radio everywhere. Whether you were lounging at the park, walking down the street, or hanging out with friends, that radio was your constant companion. You'd tune in to your favorite station, and the crackling static didn't bother you a bit. After all, hearing the latest hits was worth it, even if the signal was iffy. Rolling your windows down for air conditioning. Most cars in the 70s didn't come with air conditioning, so what did you do? You rolled down the windows and let the wind whip through your hair. You may have convinced yourself that the breeze felt just as good as AC, but in reality, it just turned your car into a wind tunnel. Either way, it was part of the road trip experience. Turning your hair into a Farrah flip. Farrah Fawcett was the queen of cool, and everyone tried to copy her iconic hairstyle. You'd spend hours in front of the mirror with a curling iron, desperately trying to get that perfect feathered flip. Whether it worked or not didn't matter. You strutted out the door with confidence, ready to show off your Farrah-inspired look to the world. Using lava lamps as nightlights. Lava lamps were a 70s staple, and every kid had one in their bedroom. It wasn't just a cool decoration, it was mesmerizing. You could stare at that lava floating up and down for what felt like hours. And when it was bedtime, it doubled as a nightlight, casting a soft, psychedelic glow across the room. Wearing tube socks, pulled all the way up. Tube socks were all the rage in the 70s, and you were guilty of pulling them up as high as they could go. It didn't matter if they were halfway up your thighs, or if they bunched awkwardly under your knees. Those colorful stripes had to be on display. Looking back, it's hard to believe we thought that was a stylish choice, but at the time, we rocked it with pride. Using a pet rock as a real pet. Yes, pet rocks were an actual thing in the 70s. And yes, you probably had one. You could buy a rock in a box, complete with instructions on how to care for it. You might have even given it a name and talked to it. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then, it was a fun and low-maintenance way to join in on one of the strangest fads ever. Trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, and never succeeding. Rubik's Cubes were the ultimate brain teaser of the 70s. Everyone was obsessed with solving it, but let's be honest, most of us never quite figured it out. You'd twist and turn it for hours, maybe getting one side completed, but the rest? A jumbled mess. Eventually, you either gave up or peeled the stickers off and solved it that way. No shame in that. Learning to roller skate and falling constantly. The 70s were a roller skating paradise, and whether you skated at the local rink or on the sidewalk, you were determined to master it. But let's not forget all the tumbles and falls along the way. You probably spent more time picking yourself up off the ground than gliding smoothly. Still, you had a blast with every stumble, and when you finally got the hang of it, you felt like a roller disco superstar. The 1970s may have been a quirky, colorful time, but it was also filled with so much laughter and lighthearted fun. The things we were guilty of back then are the very things that make us smile today. They remind us of a time when life was just a little bit sillier, and that's something to be proud of. Thanks for reminiscing with me. Until next time, keep grooving and keep smiling.